I spent 8 years building a career in education, and I didn't leave because I hated it. I actually loved it. I got to work in creative roles, designing programs, building curriculum, and innovating how we teach and learn. But in 2021, I walked away from everything, not because I had a better offer, and not because I wanted more money. I left because there was a voice inside of me, a quiet whisper that I'd been ignoring for years, that was finally louder than my fear. You know that voice, the one that nudges you when something's off, the one that says, "This isn't it," even when everyone else says it should be. We're taught to ignore it, to trust the experts, to follow the plan, to outsource our truth to what others think that we should do. But what I've learned is this: you already know. You've always known. The question isn't whether you can trust your internal compass. The real question is, will you? This is the story of the hardest decision that I've ever made. When I finally stopped asking for permission and when I started listening to the whisper. My path in education wasn't traditional. I wasn't there to lecture or hand out worksheets. I was drawn to the edge of what was possible, helping to reimagine classrooms, to challenge systems, and create things that felt alive and meaningful. And for a while, it worked. Each role felt like progress. Each opportunity looked like alignment. People told me that I was doing important work. But there was always this whisper. It was subtle at first, a feeling at the end of long days. But it wasn't an exhaustion. It was something else. It felt almost as if I was performing a version of who I was instead of actually being myself. I'd go into meetings and find myself saying what I thought they wanted to hear, nodding along with decisions that felt off, and staying quiet when that voice inside said, "Speak up." The whisper would say, "This isn't quite it. You're settling. There's something else." But I'd push it down. I got really good at pushing it down because the life I was building looked right from the outside. A steady income, good reputation, respected work. I told myself that the whisper was just perfectionism, just restlessness, just me being ungrateful for a good thing. So I stayed, and the whisper got quieter. Or maybe I just got better at ignoring it. But I did have one rule. If I ever ended up back in a traditional classroom, it was time to walk away. But that rule was my compromise with the whisper, my way of saying, "I'm still listening, sort of." But I kept finding opportunities that pulled me deeper into the system. Each one was just good enough to delay the conversation that I knew that I would eventually have to have with myself. Here's what I didn't understand then. The pretty good opportunities, they're more dangerous than the obviously bad ones. They keep you comfortable, respected, seen, but slowly disconnected from your truth. And every time you say yes to something that's only pretty good, you say no to the things that could make you truly come alive. The whisper was trying to tell me that, but I wasn't ready to listen. Not yet. And then came 2020, and everything that I thought I knew about the system had shattered. At first, it was just chaos. Everyone was adapting, doing their best, and I was too. But as months passed, something shifted. And the whisper that I'd been ignoring started to get louder. Not just about my career this time, but about something deeper. The mandates came in 2021, and I felt that familiar tug, the one that says, "Wait, let me think about this." But everyone around me was moving fast. Just do it. Trust the experts. Don't ask questions. I hesitated, but the whisper was practically shouting now, and I still ignored it. I got the first dose of the vaccine, and that's when my body started screaming about what my intuition had been whispering. I had been running 15 kilometers multiple times per week. My body was strong, reliable. I knew it intimately. But suddenly, I couldn't even go a single kilometer without my heart rate spiking uncontrollably. And that whisper became a roar. You knew. You felt this coming. Why didn't you listen? And then a couple weeks later, I woke up with chest pains. Not soreness, not even tightness. It was sharp, intense pain that ended up making me call the provincial health line. They sent an ambulance, and as I'm lying there getting my tests run, I'm thinking, this is my body telling me something important. The doctor ran through tests. He was mostly dismissive. He said it was probably nothing. But then, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned myocarditis, not as a warning and not as something to investigate. He just kind of mentioned it. And somehow, that never made it into my file. And somehow, that wasn't grounds for an exemption. I'm not here to debate policy or create controversy. I'm here to tell you what happened to me. And what happened was this. My body was screaming. My intuition had been whispering for weeks. Even the medical system briefly acknowledged a possibility. But the bureaucratic system said, it's not our problem. This wasn't about being right or wrong about anything. This was about a simple question. When your body and your intuition are both telling you something, but the people and the systems around you are dismissing or ignoring it, who do you trust? I went to doctors. I explained everything. I asked for help, for answers, for an exemption. And the response was dismissal, the bureaucratic runaround, missing documentation. I had entered education because I believed in something. Not just teaching kids math or science, but on modeling the values written on every classroom wall. Critical thinking, inquiry, compassion, integrity. I thought I was part of a system that valued truth-seeking, that rewarded asking thoughtful questions, that put human dignity above bureaucratic convenience. But when I asked questions about policy, respectful, thoughtful questions, the kind that we supposedly taught kids to ask, I was labeled insubordinate. I found myself sitting across from the superintendent. I was in a disciplinary meeting for asking reasonable questions. And in that moment, something crystallized. This system didn't want the values that it preached. It wanted compliance. It didn't reward inquiry. It punished it. The whisper I'd been ignoring for years suddenly became undeniable. This isn't who you are. And that was my line in the sand. I had to choose to either keep outsourcing my truth to a system that had lost its way, or to finally trust the voice that had been trying to guide me all along. The voice that said, you know better than this. You've always known. So I chose myself. I chose my truth. I chose to listen, and I walked away from everything. When I walked away, I expected relief. What I didn't expect was grief. I grieved the rhythm of my old life, the validation, the feeling of knowing what I was supposed to be doing. I didn't feel free after leaving. I felt lost. And no one tells you how empty it feels after you make the right decision. I thought I'd feel empowered, relieved, But for weeks, even months, I felt like I'd ripped the skin off my identity. And now I was just walking around exposed. I'd wake up in the morning and ask, what am I even supposed to be doing? Still waking up like I had somewhere to be, but I didn't. Still looking at my calendar and expecting more structure, but there was none. That part of the journey, the void, is where most people turn back. Because when you stop outsourcing your decisions to external systems and individuals, you have to learn to trust something much quieter, much less certain, but also much more true. I took on some private contract work to keep the money coming in. It wasn't anything flashy, but it was enough to create breathing room for the moment. And then I left. I traveled through Central America, worked remotely, explored slowly, and I tried to feel again. And something shifted. With the distance from all the noise, I started hearing that whisper more clearly. Not the urgent, panicked voice that said, run, but the deeper one that said, now what? What do you actually want? And then one day, I saw a poster that said, men's retreat. I had no idea what that even meant, but something inside of me stirred. Some kind of curiosity, a pull that I couldn't explain. And I almost dismissed it, but then I'd remembered that I'd been ignoring that pull for years, and maybe it was time to follow it. A few days later, I met the man who was putting it on. We talked for maybe 20 minutes, but there was something about him, a groundedness, a quiet confidence that I recognized I wanted more of in my life. He wasn't trying to sell me anything. He wasn't trying to convince me about going to the retreat. He was just present, solid. And honestly, that's when I knew I had to go. Not because I understood what I was signing up for, but because something inside of me said, this, follow this. And so I did. And that weekend cracked me open. I sat in a circle with other men. I practiced removing my masks, dropping the performance, not trying to impress anyone. We talked about grief, identity, fathers, purpose. I felt seen in a way that I hadn't in years, maybe ever. And I realized this is what I've been looking for. Not just connection, authentic connection. Not just purpose, but aligned purpose. I had been trying to find my path by thinking my way through it. But what I found instead was this. The path finds you when you stop forcing it. And when you start listening, when you start following the whisper instead of fighting it. That retreat didn't just change my direction. It showed me what trusting my internal compass actually felt like. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was home. Over the next year, I dove deeper into men's work. I started attending more retreats, studying, training, leading. And now, this is my work. But here's what's different. I didn't choose this path because it made logical sense. I didn't create a business plan or analyze market opportunities. I followed the whisper. The same voice that told me to leave education was now the voice telling me this, do more of this. And for the first time in my life, I've listened from the beginning. And what I've discovered is that men don't need more advice. We don't need someone to tell us what we should do. We need spaces where we can feel more deeply, where we can drop the masks and remember who we actually are, where we can trust our own knowing again. Because most of us have been taught to ignore that whisper, to outsource our truth to our parents' expectations, to society's definitions of success. the shoulds that everyone else seems so sure about. But here's what I've learned. The men who are most alive, most at peace, most genuinely powerful, they all learned to trust the internal compass. Not because it's always comfortable, and not because it's always clear, but because it's always true. In my work now, I'm not trying to fix anyone. I'm not trying to tell men what they should do with their lives. I'm creating spaces where they can hear what they already know, where they can learn to reconnect with that voice that's been trying to guide them all along. The first time that I sat in circle with men who weren't trying to compete with me or fix me, who were just present and just real, I felt something that I hadn't in years. Safe to be myself. And that's why I do this work. Not to coach men into being better, but to help men remember who they already are once they stop pretending, once they stop performing, and once they start listening. Because the answers that you're looking for, you already have them. You've always had them. The question is, will you trust them? If you're still watching this, maybe something in you recognizes what I'm talking about. Maybe you feel it too. That quiet but growing hum of disconnection. The whisper that says, this isn't quite it. And maybe it's not a job. Maybe it's a relationship, a friend group, a version of yourself that you've outgrown. Here's what I want you to know. You don't need more clarity to make a change. You need more honesty. The clarity comes after you listen, after you trust, after you stop waiting for permission from the outside world to honor what you already know inside. Because here's the truth. Every time that you say yes to something that's only pretty good, you say no to the things that would make you come alive. And the longer that you stay somewhere that you've outgrown, the more numb you have to become to tolerate it. At some point, comfort becomes a cage. Stability becomes stagnation. And avoiding discomfort becomes a full-time job. But what I've come to learn is that courage doesn't feel like confidence. It feels like sweaty palms, a racing heart, silence after a hard decision. And yet, underneath all that noise, there's a quiet knowing, a deep, quiet voice that says, finally. The most powerful men I know, men who lead from truth, men who live with peace, who are rooted in aligned purpose, they all had to stop outsourcing their truth and start to trust their internal compass. They had to burn something down before they could rise. So here's your question. What's the whisper that you've been ignoring? What's that quiet voice been trying to tell you? And what would it look like to stop playing it safe and to start playing it true? Your internal compass is already pointing you somewhere. The question is not whether you can trust it. The real question is, will you? If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe. I'll be sharing more about trusting your truth and stepping into authentic alignment. And if you're ready to explore what that whisper is trying to tell you, I've created something to help. It's called the 7-Day Reset, and it's 7 questions that will help you distinguish between your truth and everything else the world is trying to tell you. The link is down in the description below. This path isn't easy, but you don't have to walk it alone. The whisper is there for a reason, and maybe it's time to listen. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Stu Murray signing off, and we'll see you next week.